Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night to an unexpected knock at your door? What if the person or thing on the other side knew you were there, even though you made no sound? Tonight, we dive into one of the most terrifying Home Alone horror stories you'll ever hear. A simple knock turns into something much worse. And before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story spreads. Because you never know. Maybe this has happened to someone near you. Now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. I never liked being home alone. Something about the silence, the stillness, it always made my skin crawl. But at 22, I figured it was time to get over that fear. My parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving me with the entire house to myself. It wasn't anything fancy, just a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. I thought it would be fun, a weekend of junk food, horror movies, and gaming. But that was before the noises started. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Old houses make sounds, right? A creak here, a pop there. But this was different. It was a scratching sound. Faint at first, barely noticeable under the noise of the TV. I muted it, holding my breath. Scrape. Scrape. It was coming from the vents. I frowned. Probably a raccoon or something. We'd had pest problems before. I tried to ignore it, but as the night went on, the sound got closer. It wasn't random anymore. It moved from the vent in the living room to the one by the stairs to the one right above me. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight. My heart pounded as I walked toward the nearest vent. The metal slats looked normal, no movement, no signs of anything inside, but the sound was still there. I took a deep breath and crouched down, unscrewing the vent cover. The metal was cold under my fingers. I pulled it off and shined my flashlight inside. Nothing. Just a long, dark tunnel stretching through the house. The dust inside swirled as I moved the light. I was about to put the cover back when I saw it. A hand. Small, pale, resting inside the vent. Fingers curled slightly. It looked wrong. Like it wasn't real. Like it had been left there. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My mind raced. Was it a prank? Was someone messing with me? I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my parents. No answer. I turned back to the vent, my flashlight beam flickering slightly. The hand was gone. A cold chill ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. I ran upstairs, slamming my bedroom door shut. My mind was screaming at me to call the police, but my fingers wouldn't work. My whole body was frozen. Then I heard it again. Not from the vent this time. From inside my closet. The door creaked just a little. Just enough for me to see a sliver of darkness. Something was in there. I stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, like something was watching me. Then the door moved again. Just a crack. Enough for me to see an eye staring at me from the darkness. I wanted to scream, but my throat closed up. My legs felt like they weren't mine. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The door swung open all the way, and there it was. It wasn't a person. It looked human, but its limbs were too long, its head tilted at a strange angle. Its skin was stretched tight, almost translucent, and its mouth was too wide. Too many teeth. It just stood there, watching me. A breathy, wet sound escaped its throat, and it started moving toward me. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, like it wasn't used to walking. It took a step, then another, its head twitching as if studying me. I turned and ran. I didn't think. I just threw the window open and climbed out onto the roof. My hands slipped on the cold shingles as I scrambled down, hitting the ground hard. My ankle twisted, sending a jolt of pain up my leg, but I didn't stop. I ran to my neighbor's house, pounding on the door like my life depended on it. Because it did. The police came. They searched the house. They found the vents ripped open, found the crawlspace access in my closet. They found something else too. Inside the walls, there were drawings, hundreds of them, scrawled in black charcoal. Eyes watching, faces screaming. Some were of me. The officer pulled me aside. His face was pale, tight. "You said you lived here alone?" "Yes." My voice barely came out. He exhaled, rubbing his chin. "Then, who's been eating your food?" My stomach dropped. They checked the kitchen. Inside the fridge, food was missing. My cereal boxes were opened, but I hadn't touched them. Something had been living here. The vents had handprints inside them. Smudged, oily prints of small, pale hands. But the worst part, the attic hatch was open. A makeshift bed was inside. Blankets, empty food wrappers, a notebook. The officers didn't let me see what was written in it, but I saw the cover before they took it away. It had my name on it. The police stayed for hours, searching every inch of the house, but they never found the thing. And I knew it was still out there, watching, waiting, somewhere in the vents. I woke up to the sound of breathing, not my own, slow, ragged, and too deep for me to mistake it for anything else. It wasn't coming from my bed, or the hallway, or even outside my window. It was coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I blinked a few times, trying to shake the sleep from my head, but the sound didn't go away. It was steady, rhythmic, like someone struggling to keep quiet. I froze. My body turned to stone under the covers. I lived alone. I barely even had visitors. So what was inside my walls? I didn't want to move, didn't want to breathe too loud, but my hands were already gripping my phone, fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight. The dim glow illuminated my small bedroom. Nothing looked out of place. The door was shut, the window locked, but the breathing continued. Then, a noise. Scrape! Something dragging against metal. I swallowed hard and sat up slowly. The sound was coming from the air vent near the ceiling. The old metal cover had always been loose, and I had been meaning to tighten it for months. But now, as I stared at it, I realized that something was inside the vent, and it was moving. I forced myself to breathe evenly. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe a rat or some bird that had gotten stuck in the ducts. That would explain the noise, the breathing. But as I leaned forward, my stomach twisted. There was a shadow inside the vent. Something big. I grabbed my phone, heart slamming against my ribs, as I turned on the camera. I zoomed in, aiming the flashlight directly into the vent. For a moment, there was nothing. Just darkness. Dusty metal slats. Then, 2 eyes opened. I dropped the phone. The eyes didn't belong to a rat. They were human. Wide, bloodshot, unblinking. They stared directly at me, hidden behind the darkness of the vent. I could barely make out the outline of a face pressed against the metal slats, watching me. A hand reached through the vent, fingers thin and filthy, nails cracked and yellowed. I screamed. I scrambled backward, falling off my bed, my legs tangling in the sheets. The thing in the vent moved, shifting with unnatural speed, its fingers twitching as if it wanted to reach further. The breathing turned to laughter, a wet, choking sound, like someone trying to force air through lungs that shouldn't be working. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911. The operator answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my vents, I gasped. A person! There's someone in my house! The operator's voice remained calm, asking for my address, but I barely heard her. I was too focused on the vent. The hand was gone, but the laughter still echoed through the metal. Then, something worse happened. I heard the vents creak open in the hallway. I wasn't alone anymore. He was inside the house. I ran for the door, yanking it open and bolting for the stairs. The hallway was dark, shadows stretching unnaturally against the walls. I reached for the light switch. Click. Nothing. The power was out. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled down the stairs, gripping the railing for support. Behind me, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate, coming from the hallway. He was following me. I reached the front door and fumbled with the lock. My fingers were slick with sweat, slipping against the metal. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. The footsteps got closer. My ears were ringing. My chest felt like it was going to explode. Then, bang! The sound of metal slamming open. I turned my head, just for a second. A figure crawled out of the vent in the hallway. Long limbs, impossibly thin. Its body twisted unnaturally as it slithered onto the floor. Its head snapped toward me, and for the first time I saw its face. Pale, sunken, lips torn at the edges, twisted into a too-wide grin. And its eyes, hollow dark pits that locked onto mine. I shoved the door open and ran outside. The freezing air hit me like a wall, but I didn't stop. I sprinted to my neighbor's house, pounding on their door with everything I had. My throat burned as I screamed for help. The door finally opened, and my neighbor, an older man, half asleep, stared at me in confusion. I turned back to my house, expecting to see him standing there watching me. But the doorway was empty. The police arrived within minutes. They searched every inch of the house. Checked the vents, the attic, even the crawl space. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No damage to the vents, like he was never there. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And the worst part? When the officers checked the vent in my room, they found something. A notebook. Inside, there were pages of messy, scribbled writing. The words didn't make sense, just repeating sentences, over and over. I see you when you sleep. I hear you breathing. I know when you're alone. I always hated mirrors, not in the usual way, where you avoid your own reflection because of self-doubt or insecurity. No, my reason was different, more primal, more terrifying. It started when I was a kid. I always had this feeling that the reflection in the mirror wasn't really me, that it was something else, something pretending. At first, I thought it was just an overactive imagination, a childhood fear I would grow out of. But last night, I learned I was right, and now I don't know what to do. It started with a mistake. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, just enough space for me to eat, sleep, and scroll on my phone until I pass out. The only mirror in my apartment is the one in my bathroom, one of those old wall-mounted mirrors with a cabinet behind it. For years, I made sure to never look at it too long. It sounds stupid, but I always felt like if I stared at my reflection for too long, something bad would happen. Last night, I broke my own rule. I had just finished brushing my teeth when I noticed something strange. My reflection wasn't moving right. It wasn't delayed or anything dramatic like in horror movies, but it was just off. The way my head tilted didn't feel natural. The way my lips curled at the edges of my mouth. Too tight, too forced. And then I did something even worse. I leaned closer. I don't know why. Curiosity? Fear? A twisted need to prove to myself that I was imagining things? Whatever the reason, I stepped toward the mirror, studying every detail of my face. That's when my reflection blinked. I didn't. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, staring at my own face, except it wasn't mine anymore. It was smiling. A slow, unnatural grin spread across my reflection's face. My real lips never moved, my stomach twisted in horror as the reflection tilted its head, eyes locking onto mine like a predator watching prey. Then, the light flickered. For a split second, the bathroom was pitch black. When the light came back, the mirror was empty. I wasn't there. My reflection was gone. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. My hands flew to my face, feeling my own skin, making sure I was still real. But the mirror remained empty. Then the cabinet door swung open on its own. I ran. The wrong reflection. I spent the rest of the night locked in my bedroom, too scared to sleep, too scared to even close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw that smile, that twisted, unnatural grin. By morning, I convinced myself that I was just sleep deprived. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe it was just a dream. I had to check. I walked back into the bathroom, heart pounding. The mirror looked normal. My reflection was back. I let out a shaky breath and stepped closer, staring at myself. My reflection copied me perfectly. I raised my hand. It did the same. I turned my head. It followed. I smiled. It didn't. My stomach dropped. My reflection's face stayed completely blank. I slowly lowered my hand, my entire body going numb with fear. It was staring at me, waiting. Then it raised its hand, a full 2 seconds after I had already lowered mine. I staggered back, panic clawing at my throat. My reflection wasn't me anymore. It was something else. And then it spoke. A whisper, low and wrong and not mine. You shouldn't have looked. The last thing I remember was my own scream. I am not alone anymore. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, I was lying on the bathroom floor, the light flickering overhead. My mouth was dry, my limbs heavy. My head pounded as I pushed myself up to my feet. And then I saw the mirror. The glass was cracked. My reflection stood there smiling. But it wasn't just a normal smile. It was a mockery of one. Too wide, too sharp, too knowing. It was happy. Because now, it wasn't trapped in the mirror anymore. I was. I reached out, pressing my hands against the glass. The cold surface didn't feel like a reflection anymore. It felt solid. A barrier. My real body, or whatever was pretending to be me, stood in the bathroom, stretching, rolling its shoulders like it was getting used to its new skin. It turned to the side, admiring itself in the mirror. Then it looked at me, and winked. I pounded on the glass, screamed, but no sound came out. The thing wearing my face smiled one last time before walking away, leaving me trapped, alone, inside the mirror. And the worst part? No one will ever know. Because to the rest of the world, I'm still out there.